And then at 1:30 on the 8th of August, Hurricane Alex hit us with everything it had. A rogue wave picked the boat up and it felt vertical, and then the whole boat rolled over. And there was this just humongous crack as the boat broke in half. And it was completely black, and there was cold water, cold Atlantic water spraying on my face and was starting to drown. Well, the first time that I saw an article in the Times newspaper, it read, "Blythe sets ocean challenge to rival Everest." I stepped back, and it was the moment I saw that this man, Shea Bly, who had rowed across the Atlantic Ocean back in 1966, he was now organising a rowing race, the first of its type, from Tenerife to Barbados. The next caption read that more men had stood on the moon than had rowed an ocean. So I was hooked the moment I read it, that article. I first told my wife, Paula. I had this article that I pinned up at home on our, in our kitchen, and there was a silence to start with. Then she just took a couple of days to sort of ask me, what's it all about? What's this article, rowing across the Atlantic Ocean? I didn't tell her that 5 people had actually died doing it. I told her that I had this dream that I wanted to row across the Atlantic Ocean from Tenerife to Barbados.
He was extreme about sport, always liked to be pushing himself to limits, and passionate about life. Would get the most out of every minute of the day. You would very rarely see him doing nothing.
I just loved being focused and loved being driven. And of course, this was the big one, wasn't it? It was that sort of stepping out into the unknown, taking on the ocean, taking on Mother Nature, taking on the elements. And I loved the sea, I loved the water. So, it really was something that sort of captured my imagination.
Mark Stubbs couldn't resist the challenge. He was determined to row the ocean and joined the rowing team.
And we signed up to the first Atlantic rowing race. There were 30 competitors from all around the world took part, leaving in October 1997 from Tenerife and rowing to Barbados. And we managed to get across in 58 days. The ocean let us across. We survived. And while I was rowing, I also was starting to think about the next challenge, rowing the North Atlantic Ocean. This idea of rowing from Canada, rowing into Great Britain and designing this record-breaking rowing boat, And as we slowly trekked our way across the Atlantic Ocean, I started designing this boat in my mind and started sort of getting the next challenge. The North Atlantic Ocean is a completely different place. Storms are commonplace. There's temperatures drop to -15. Icebergs, some the size of Belgium, but the worst bergs are the growlers, which are the size and weight of a piano that will rip your boat in half. 5 people had actually died crossing that route. One that year, the year before we rowed, had lost his life on in the North Atlantic Ocean. So you needed to get together the right guys and the right boat to achieve that. But the dream of rowing into Great Britain, being the first people to row into Falmouth, was something that was just really exciting.
Mark is married and has 2 daughters, yet he doesn't have a problem with the danger he is voluntarily facing. His choice puts a strain on his marriage.
He asked me how I felt about it, and I told him exactly how I felt about it, which wasn't keen at all. I didn't want him to do it at all. And the reason I didn't want him to do it was because it really put our relationship under a lot of pressure the first time. I didn't know that our relationship could survive another row, but he assured me that he had learnt a lot from the first time, and that he would not let the same sort of stresses affect us as had done the first time round.
You believe that?
No. I didn't believe that. I didn't believe that because I knew that with the best intention in the world and that Mark would try his utmost, things snowball, and once you start something off, you are carried along on it, and that things get out of hand.
Rowing oceans makes you a very selfish person because there's an awful lot of time that you've got to spend away from the family, and that's hard that is very hard on the family. One of the hardest things is to say goodbye to your family. And the night before I left, I went to give Victoria a kiss goodnight in her bed. She's got a little bunk bed, and I climbed up with her and was giving her a hug and just telling her how much I loved her.
He came in to give me a kiss goodnight, and I was really quite upset at this point because I knew that I wasn't going to see him for quite a while, and that's always quite upsetting. And it had been a question that I'd been thinking about for quite a long time, ever since I'd become a Christian, and I knew he was going to do it. So I plucked up the courage to actually ask him if he thought he was going to die or if he was in danger, if he would actually say the prayer to become a Christian.
It was like somebody piercing my heart because my family, but all the girls were Christians at this stage, and I hadn't become a Christian. And she was asking this impossible thing of me to say that I could do that.
He said, if I am in danger, I will think of you, and I'll see what's actually the situation and how I feel then, and what happens up to that point. And that was all he said to me, really.
For her to ask that to me was, it's horrible to say no to your daughter. And I'd never ever liked to say no, and I found it very hard to sort of leave her with saying that I couldn't say that. You know, my life was full. I was somebody that believed in one life, live it. I loved having those challenges. I'm somebody that sort of, you know, when it was time to die, you know, I'm going to be tired and worn out, and that was going to be the end. We left on the 30th of June 2004, and in a blaze of publicity there was a camera crew down there, and it was a lovely day. We got into this little pink boat and off we went, and you know, lifted our hats in this blaze of glory to leave out on this big journey. One night we came out to row at sort of early hours of the morning, and it was just like a bomb site. I mean, the ocean didn't have any form to it. It was completely and utterly like doing 10 rounds with Mike Tyson. The ocean was just being picked up into little sort of like a mogul feel if you've ever skied, and you know how pounding they are when you're to your body when you're banging down a mogul field hard. Well, we're trying to row in that, and it was just knocking the boat all over the show, and you know, just to try and get any rhythm in it, and you know, when you're digging in and each blade time it dug in the water, it was just like coming into cement. You know, there was no movement in the boat, and waves were breaking into the boat, and the wind was up and blowing in our face, so it was cold, and it just felt incredibly hard. It was one of those bits that you just had to dig in. We were rowing, and it was just getting dark, and this fin appeared sort of about 100 feet from us, and it was a big fin. You know, it was quite obvious what it was. It was a killer whale, and this starts circling round us, and then another fin joined it, and another fin, and there was 4 fins, killer whales circling our boat. You know, they'd come to look at us. You know, we were in their ocean. You know, it was like, what's that slapping around the water? And they were quite inquisitive to see what was going on. You know, making a different noise. And they sort of got closer and closer, and one came between the oar and the boat, and it came under, touching the boat, looked at us, and then sort of disappeared into the blue ocean. It was just like, wow, coming so close to that sort of wildlife.
The dangers, it didn't really bother me because that's what he'd done ever since I was little, ever since before I was born. So it was almost normal, and I wasn't afraid of what was going to happen because I knew how long it had taken him to prepare it, and I knew that he'd done everything properly.
You never thought about the fact that it could get wrong?
No, because I saw he was so well prepared. You never want to think that your dad's going to die. It doesn't really ever cross your mind at all.
You know how you always get that fantasy that your dad's invincible and like Superman sort of thing. I wasn't really afraid of what was going to happen.
The weather router told us that Hurricane Alex had formed off the east coast of America very, very early, and Hurricane Alex was buffering its way along the east coast of America, causing devastation on its path. Hurricanes tend to sort of veer out into the Atlantic Ocean and then sort of get out there and then die down. They lose their momentum when they hit something like the Azores High, which is a big high pressure, or they just burn themselves out. Well, the Hurricane Alex, instead of doing that, ended up picking up 2 storms and they became a Category 3 hurricane. We were talking about wind speeds of up to 120 mile an hour, waves 50 foot in size. When we were speaking to the weatherman and he told us that to expect structural damage, there was a cold feeling go through my spine because I knew that he never played things down. He was very, very accurate, and this hurricane was now going to come and eat us up. And then we all had an opportunity to phone home, and it was a real surreal situation to be in, to get on the satellite phone. You're just about to face a hurricane, and ringing home here in Poole and Dorset, and it was a hot summer's day, and I could hear the girls outside. They were having a barbecue.
Obviously we're shocked and oh no, oh my goodness, and we're really worried.
He told us that there was a really, really bad storm coming, and when he told us about it, I kind of got the sinking feeling inside that, oh no, he could actually get hurt.
I think we sort of drew together and pray and sort of draw close in that way, and hope that he would be safe and that everything would be okay.
I just told her that I would call her in the morning, and then there was this feeling, as I put the phone down, that knot in my stomach, that feeling that maybe this would be the last time that I would speak to her. And I had to pick the phone up again and ring her again and just tell her how much I loved her, and just how much she meant to me.
During the night, Hurricane Alex reaches the Pink Lady.
A force 7 graduating to a full-blown hurricane with waves twice the size of double-decker buses rising up. And then, when they came breaking down around us, it sounded like, the best way to describe it is an earthquake, rumbling, as you could hear the waves just building up behind you and then come crashing down on you. I really felt that my life hung on a very thin thread there. What was scary about being in this tiny little cabin was the fact that the sea anchor line, which was 10 mil thick, no bigger than my finger, as the storm raged around us, it screamed every time the line pulled tight. And you realise that every time it was being pulled to the breaking point, that if that snapped, then the boat would roll over and there'd be sort of no telling what would happen. And for the whole of the time, for 5 hours, I lay there being kicked around, black and blue. There was no way that you could relax. It was at this time where I was bartering with God or not, but it was a case of, okay, God, if I'm sat here and if I get back alive, I would go on an Alpha course. An Alpha course is something to find out about God, and finding out about a meaning of life. It's a 12-week course where you go and you can ask all the questions you like. I would want to find out a little bit more because there was something missing. Then at 1:30 on the 8th of August, Hurricane Alex hit us with everything it had. A rogue wave picked the boat up and it felt vertical. The boat actually, Pete came down on top of me and then the whole boat rolled over. And there was this just humongous crack as the boat broke in half. In the cabin was upside down with Pete on top of me, and it was completely black, and there was cold water, cold Atlantic water spraying on my face. Pete was diving out following me, and he bumped into Jonathan, and when the wave hit us and the boat that broke in half, he'd been sucked into the water, and his survival suit had actually filled with water, and he's now being sucked down by the weight of the survival suit and was starting to drown. And as Pete grabbed hold of him, he was able to pull him to the side and then was able to sort of put his suit back on and then squeeze the water from his suit to be able to sort of help him to get the suit back up and done up again. Jonathan had hypothermia and was going down very, very quickly. John Wills had a head injury and broken a couple of ribs. It was important that we kept morale up. It was important that we kept everybody awake and focused on surviving, because Jonathan, if he'd fallen into a sleep, that's when people die. Once we got into the life raft, I remember looking back at Pink Lady upside down in the water and thinking to us, we've got to get away from this wreckage, because a puncture would have certainly finished us, and this another wave, a big wave, came over and started washing Pink Lady away from us. And I remember sort of looking as she just disappeared down a wave, and thinking to myself, there I had 10 years of my life being given out to rowing, and the time and preparation in getting that boat together, and the amount of effort that I'd put into building it, designing it, getting the team together. That dream, there it was, just sort of rolling away, and we'd been beaten by wind and water, the simple elements that had, risen up against us and was now sort of just washing this Pink Lady away. And I could actually then turn around and put in perspective what it was all about. It didn't matter. None of that mattered. It was materialistic things. And I remember turning to the guys zipping up the life raft and turning around and said, we're alive, and that's all that matters, Nothing else mattered then. We were in the life raft, and it was just a fantastic feeling to be there.
Fortunately, the apparatus used to send an emergency signal hasn't been lost. Paula receives the news that the Pink Lady has sunk and that Mark is in a lifeboat.
I was aware that it was a very dangerous situation to be in a life raft even. The fact that they were in the life raft didn't really mean that they were safe. Yes, I was very aware of that. And, it's hard to describe how I felt at that time. Obviously, tremendously afraid.
Mum said, I've got something to tell you, and right at that second I knew that something had happened and it was bad. And I said, oh, it's come to an end, hasn't it? And she said, when in the storm, their boat broke in half, and me and my sister looked at each other and we couldn't believe it.
My first thought, funnily enough, was, I can't believe the boat's gone. Because I don't know why. Because I think it just never crossed my mind that my dad might die at all. I just couldn't believe that, and because I'd seen how much preparation and how much it meant to him to get across, and they were so close, and it was just, how could this have happened?
I got hold of the Bible and got into bed and just prayed. And that's all I could do.
The Coast Guard picks up the emergency signal and asks a Scandinavian ship in the area to lend assistance.
They fired a rescue line out, and we watched this light line flying in the air, and we were able to grab hold of it and then start pulling ourselves towards the ship. And it was heeling so badly. The boat, at one stage, you could see the rescuers. You could look at their eyes, the smiling faces, their teeth. And then the next minute, you were level with the barnacles at the bottom of the boat. If we entered the water at this stage, there was no way that anyone could have saved us. Now, we hadn't stood up for 38 days, we hadn't. So, you know, it's a sort of, Jonathan had hypothermia, John Wills had head injury and rib injuries, and you were having to move onto the rope ladder that's swinging out and back against this ship and make a climb.
Finally, all 4 members of the Pink Lady make it to safety on board the Scandinavian ship.
And then I tried to stand up and just sort of thank these guys that rescued our lives, and I couldn't because my legs weren't going to function, you know, and the waves were moving so violently. And so I just crawled to the guys and just hugged them and just said thank you for saving our lives. It was just a fantastic moment to feel that steel around us, knowing that, you know, I was now safe.
Mark calls Paula from the boat to let her know that he and the team are all safe.
That's a fantastic phone call, and I promised her that I would never row again. And she said, "Don't say that." She said, "You can't say that." She said, "Just come home safely. You know, we'll meet you at the airport."
It was very relieving to think that he was okay and that he was going to get back safe, even though it had been a really bad disaster and he could have died in that he'd been in the sea for like 5 hours. And the fact that he was safe, it was a miracle, really. And I knew that in my heart that it was a miracle.
We flew into Southampton Airport, and it was a fantastic feeling to see the doors open and to see Brianna, Victoria and Paula, you know, just with their big smiling faces, just and give them a hug. And it was, you know, I was safe. We got in the car to drive back to Poole, some 30 miles away, and the first thing I said when we got in the car, I said that I would go on an Alpha course, and there was this big, huge cheer as they all, you know, just thought, you know, yeah, Dad's going to go on an Alpha course. It was great.
And yes, he said, I've decided I'm going to find out more about God, because there was something, you know, it's made me think while I was out there. Made me think a lot, and he said, and I'm going to find out a bit more. He said, so I'm just going to give it a chance. He said, and see what happens. He said, I'm not promising you anything, but I'll go and do an Alpha course.
I went along. There was 20 people on the course, a couple of atheists of all you know, different beliefs, and you know, we did 2 of the things that I loved the most, and that's eating good food and, you know, chatting and talking, debating, you know, and it was really very interesting. I was just over halfway in the Alpha course, and we went to Bath City Church to John and Carol Arnott, who were visiting this country. And the beginning of the service, she asked if anybody didn't know God. And so I put my hands up. I didn't know God and I didn't know Jesus, and she then invited people down. It was one of those moments where it felt like a magnet pulling me down towards the front. And I was walking past Victoria, and she looked at Paula and said, "Is Dad all right?" You know, Dad doesn't do that sort of thing. And I was walking forward, and I went down the front of the stage, and Carol said to me, "You know, would you like to know Jesus?" And there was this stirring in my whole body, and she then says, just say the simple prayer after me. And I was able to say a simple prayer and lay down and just be filled with God's love, filled with what felt like honey, felt this uplifting feeling of just feeling, you know, totally immersed in love.
When he became a Christian, he was so happy. For the couple of weeks, he was just happy the whole time, and it was the best few weeks of Dad.
He had a touch, he had an experience that was so amazing that he was just totally bowled over by it, and he couldn't believe all that he'd missed. He couldn't believe that it was right there all the time, and he'd never been aware of it, of God.
It was so nice, and I could see the change in him. It really had affected him. Like all the events leading up to that one point had just shaped him in a different way, and I can still see a definite change.
Now my life my passion is to become more like Jesus. You know, I love getting involved with the homeless people, getting involved and sharing just time with them. I enjoy working with young people. We run a kids club at the church called Our House, and it's all about having fun with Jesus. And I've just found this sort of new me that's about giving. You know, and we're all unique. We're all different people. There are different keys, and for me to be touched in that way and in such a loving way, I'm somebody that from love comes courage, as I said. You know, I needed to be touched by love.